charter fishing captain from here in the Treasure Coast, Mike Holliday. He's going to say a few words. Kyle Green, owner and operator of Kyle G's Restaurants, also going to say a few words. Then we've got a number of great folks from the Florida legislature here. Our senators, Gail Harrell and Aaron Grawl are here. I want to thank them. And then we have representatives, Snyder, Trabulsi, Tremont, Brackett, Abbott, and Overdorf are all here with us. So they've done a good job for you. And we're going to highlight a lot of things from the budget, but particularly a lot of the great work we've done with conservation and environmental stewardship. So we have some folks here representing those communities, including Kelly Ralston from Bonefish and Tarpon Trust, Scott Wagner with the South Florida Water Management District, Mike Register with the St. Johns River Water Management District, Dwayne DeFries with the Indian River Lagoon Council, and Captain Chris Whitman for Captains for Clean Water. So if you look at how we handle our budget versus, say, how Washington handles its budget, we run big budget surpluses in the state of Florida. We lower taxes in the state of Florida. We are able to do things that make a difference in people's lives by not wasting money, but by spending it on things that really have a great impact on the general public. And so we're good fiscal stewards. We want it to be a good place to be a citizen, and we respect taxpayers, and we respect that not only by taxing lightly, but also by spending reasonably. So we're going to be able to talk about a lot of great things, but I think this is interesting. The federal government, the economy of our country is 24, 25 trillion, something like that. And yet our debt is over 31 trillion. It's going to end up 35 trillion soon after this recent thing. And so the debt is much larger than the size of the American economy for the federal debt. Well, in Florida, our gross domestic product, size of our economy, is about $1.2 trillion. We would be the 13th largest economy in the world if we were our own country. And yet our debt, with $1.2 trillion for an economy, is only $17 billion. So that's like a 1.5% ratio, whereas the U.S. government is like 140% debt to economy. Our debt is just a sliver. We've paid down billions of debt since I became governor. This budget actually has a program that we suggested and the legislature picked up that will accelerate debt repayment from what we are already very low levels of debt. So in Florida, we have the second lowest debt per capita in the entire United States. And so you're built for the long haul. You also compare us to other states. Our unemployment rate has been under 3%. It's 2.6%. New York, California, they're like 4%. And not that 4% is high, but, we're 30, 40% lower than those other big states. We're even probably about a percentage point lower than Texas. I think they're about 3.5, 3.6, and obviously they have a very, very strong economy, have for a number of years. And so if you look at our performance, particularly since COVID, we've outperformed the country dramatically on just about all these metrics. Certainly in jobs, we have way more people employed in Florida today than we did prior to COVID. There are other parts of the country haven't even recovered from where they were prior to COVID. I mean, some of these cities that were locked down for so long, it's had devastating impacts on them. So we've done better. Our GDP has grown much more than the country as a whole, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years. And so on all these different metrics. Oh, by the way, visitation. You have some of these groups, trying to do these stunts saying don't visit Florida. Well, I can tell you that we set a record for Q1 for visitors coming. And when people were doing it a month or so ago, like right before Memorial Day, they were saying, don't go. I think we had the biggest Memorial Day weekend that I think we've ever had in Florida history. So people are coming for visitation like they've never had before, and we're proud of that. And so there's just been a lot of great stuff. Now, having said that, we have to deal like any other state in this country with the inflation that we've seen. They say inflation is down. Understand, it may not be increasing as fast as it was, 6-9 months ago, but the increases are all on top of all the price increases already. So if your grocery bill doubled in the last year, it's still going up. It may just be going up a little less rapidly than it had been 6 months or a year ago. So this is a big problem for a lot of people. And why has it happened? Because Washington has borrowed, spent, and printed trillions and trillions of dollars since March of 2020. I mean, you can't just do that and think that there's not going to be any ramifications for that kind of mismanagement. I mean, if all you had to do was borrow, print, and spend money, why not just do 100 trillion, make everyone richer, right? We know there's no free lunch. We know ultimately the bill comes due. And so the bill has come due with those policies, and a lot of it was driven by irrational reaction with the COVID lockdowns and some of the things that were done. So the bill comes due, and really the bill has come due in the form of the average person having to pay a lot more for the necessities of life. That's an invisible tax that the federal government has imposed on every American over these last few years, and that's harmful. So we look for ways, okay, what can we do to try to alleviate that? Obviously, we don't control the Federal Reserve. If we did, we'd have somebody else in there, I can tell you that. And so there's a lot that we're limited in terms of being able, and the federal government, you're talking trillions and trillions of dollars. I mean, our budget, we're like, a little over 100 billion, 115 billion, 116 billion. So that's that's budget dust compared to what they're doing in Washington. So nevertheless, though, we said, okay, what can we do to be helpful? So, we had a $20 billion surplus going into this year, which was like the biggest ever. But, you don't want to run deficits, of course, you do that. But, you don't want to have too big of a surplus, because that means you should be giving tax relief for people to do. So we said, you know what, we're going to take, that surplus, and we're going to do the biggest tax cuts that we've ever done in the history of the state of Florida. So we ended up doing a total of $2.7 billion in tax relief for people throughout this state. That's a record by far. Last year we did $1.2 billion, which was the record for Florida. And so we more than doubled last year's record, and part of what we did is we did 50% reduction for tolls for our commuters, which was about $500 million in savings. Not every part of the state has the same problems with tolls, but there are some parts of the state you can't breathe without having to pay a toll. And it's like these people have to spend $100, $150, sometimes $200 a month, depending on how they commute, if they're in Miami or if they're in Orlando. And so we thought that would be important to be able to do. So that's a huge deal. So they basically just get a 50% rebate on their SunPass every month. And so that's going to save people hundreds of dollars. I think it'll save some of our commuters over $1,000 just because of how many tolls they pay. But we also did, okay, what else can we do to make it easier, particularly for necessities of life, seniors on fixed income, families raising young children. So we were able to do permanent sales tax exemption on all baby and toddler items. So cribs, strollers, diapers, wipes, children's clothing, anything for age 5 and under is now tax-free in the state of Florida starting July 1st. And so that's going to make it easier to raise kids. We have 6, 5, and 3, so we're not doing the diapers anymore. We had to sign enabling legislation for the tax, and when I did that 1 month or so ago, I was real excited, really proud of what the legislature and we accomplished, had a big smile on my face. I came home, my wife's like, why didn't you do that in 2019 when our kids were still in diapers? Well, we're doing it. So we think it's going to help combat the rising prices to be able to do that. So that's going to save families a lot of money. We're now doing 2 back-to-school sales tax holidays, and so each one will be 2 weeks, in both for the fall semester and for the spring semester, and that's really important for a lot of families to be able to do that. We also have Freedom Summer Sales Tax Holiday. So it started on Memorial Day, and when we signed the bill a few weeks ago, and it goes all the way through Labor Day, and that's for all these recreational items are tax-free. And so a lot of youth sports equipment, for example, tax-free. also other things like events and things. So it's really, really, I think, a neat way for people to save money. It's going to save Floridians almost $250 million when you look at all the things that we've taken the tax away for. So I'm proud of that. There's 2 disaster preparedness sales tax holidays, each lasting 14 days. That'll save $144 million. Look, knock on wood, I mean, we hope to not have to have a big storm, but we always prepare. Last year we had Hurricane Ian, which was a big monster storm in southwest Florida. So this allows Floridians to be able to make those preparations, get what you need, and save some money. We also did, because they say that they're going to leave you alone when you call them on different things, but in reality we know what they're up to. They're coming for your gas stoves. We know that, okay? And so what we were able to do is we did a sales tax exemption on all gas stoves. So you get a gas stove tax-free in Florida. We want you to be able to make that choice. And we don't have, if you look at how Florida grew up, there was a lot of, the way the develops was, not as many gas lines as maybe in the Northeast or some places. So there is a lot of electric, but at the end of the day, that's your choice to do. And if people want to do it, and, I think the gas is better for cooking, and so I would want, that's what I would want. So now that's tax-free, and so we're pushing in the opposite direction of the Biden administration. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that are going to make a big difference in terms of the tax relief. So again, helping people cope with rising prices and the economic squeeze that we've seen the federal government put us on. And another thing that's going to really help people, because you have a situation where people are flooding into this state. There's a lot of demand to be here, and then you have overall inflation, which has caused building materials to go up, all these things. And so you have folks who are like nurses, teachers, cops. They come, they want to be able to live in their local community. You don't want to have to commute an hour just because that's the only place you can find an affordable place to stay, particularly for younger workers. And so we were able to sign earlier this year the Live Local Act. It is going to create really significant incentives to be able to provide more housing opportunities, particularly for folks who are the backbone of our workforce in communities throughout Florida. And it's a total of $850 million in both tax incentives and sales tax refunds on building that's going to make provide more affordable options for Florida families. And I've already had people tell me, like, oh my gosh, this is it's like the opposite of like what California would do. They would make it more difficult, right? You have to pay more. We're making it so people are going to have more options. There's a lot of people that are wanting to utilize this and provide new building. And so this is a way to combat some of those headwinds. But I'll tell you, when we started to see inflation taking off, they may say it was 9% at one point, right? That does not really get at what it really was, because some of the building materials were up 50%, 60%. I mean, it was incredible what was going on. Well, that's going to be reflected, of course, in all of this. And so we're pushing back in the wrong direction on that, in the other direction, the right direction on that, when they're going in the wrong direction. So we're proud of that. I think the budget's going to make a difference for people who really, are working hard. We also, because of the surplus, we said, okay, the state is growing. We know we have to do infrastructure. We have a work plan with the Department of Transportation where projects are there. But, some things may be further back in the queue. And so the question is there a way we can accelerate projects in areas where you really have bad congestion? And there's different spots around the state where you have that. So we're taking $4 billion and we're doing an infusion for acceleration of these infrastructure projects so that we don't have people stuck in traffic for the next 20 years. Some of these projects would not be done for 20 years. Now we'll accelerate them. We'll end up doing them 13 years ahead of schedule in some instances. And so that's going to be a big, big deal, particularly in parts of the state that are having big problems. We also, in the budget, include $130 million for targeted pay increases for people in state law enforcement and public safety agencies. And so different parts of the country have slashed police spending, attacked law enforcement. We've consistently, in Florida, stood by people in law enforcement. not only with good policy, but also with good compensation. So the $130 million, these are salary increases for state LEOs depending on their agency, which is going to be really, really meaningful. And we did a pay increase last year, too. We also did, for the third year in a row, $1,000 bonuses for all law enforcement in Florida and firefighters in Florida. And so that's a lot of people, and that ends up being, I think we did hundreds of millions a year on those bonuses. And so I know a lot of people really appreciate that. Budget, yeah, it's important. The budget also includes $1.1 billion for raises for teachers and instructional personnel. That's a record in Florida. We set the record last year with $800 million. This is much more than that, and I think it's going to make a big difference. And so we're out of that. They can only, though, spend this $1.1 billion on increasing teacher salaries. I don't want this money going to bureaucracy or to unions. I want it going to the teachers, and that's what will happen here. 100% will go in their pocket. Budget also includes a record $635 million for workforce education programs and funding. And the thing is, we do a lot on higher education, and in Florida, our universities are affordable. You can go as in-state, it's $6,200, $6,400, depending on the university. I don't think you can get that anywhere else in the country, and so we believe that that's important, but we think it's got to be affordable. And we haven't raised tuition in Florida, I think, for 10 years. And they asked me about raising tuition, like, should I was like, how much are you spending on DEI? Like, you're going to raise tuition? And they're actually not spending any more on Florida because we nixed it this year. So no more DEI in our universities. That's gone. But, my view is that these tuition increases over the last generation around the country has not improved the quality of the education in any of these universities. It goes to administrative bloat, and it goes to a lot of things that are not really having a direct impact on student achievement. And so we're not doing that in Florida, so we hold the line on tuition, which is very important. A lot of these other universities around the country, to go $100,000, $150,000 in debt and then end up with a degree in zombie studies, and then you end up in a job you could have had out of high school anyways. There's nothing magic about a piece of paper. It's really, what does that reflect in terms of, what type of knowledge or skills you've accumulated. And so our view is that a four-year brick and ivy university is one way students can be successful. It's not the only way, and it's not even the best way for many people. And in fact, if you look, we have students coming out of high school that are certified in different areas that are getting really good jobs right away. Very high demand. We've done things like expand the number of commercial driver's licenses that are issued for people that want to be truck drivers. We were doing 600 a year before I became governor. Now we have capacity for 3,500 new truck drivers produced in Florida every year. They make six figures a lot of times right off the bat for companies like Walmart and all this stuff. So, and then you have other skills for more advanced manufacturing that really require this type of education, not going to, the university and taking some esoteric subject. It's just not something that's going to. So we're focusing on that. We've doubled apprenticeships in Florida, and it's not just something that we're saying, like a state college. We're talking about middle school and high school being able to expose students to these skills and getting them into opportunities. So I think that's going to be a big deal going forward. And if you look at all the people that are in student debt who are having a tough time pay it back, the university should be responsible for guaranteeing the debt. Because if they were on the hook, if someone defaulted on the debt, you know what they would do? They wouldn't be offering a lot of gender studies courses. They would be offering courses where they know people who do well are going to end up doing gainful employment and are going to be successful. And so as it is now, you've had a lot of students take courses, take majors that haven't been successful, and there's a lot of debt, and it's really weighed down a lot of students. So, I'd like to see that put on the shoulders of the universities, they can guarantee the loans, and I think they would make much more different decisions as a result of that. We also have $191 million for cancer research and care. A lot of that, my wife has really spearheaded that, and so she wants to, I think she's smart about, the same old stuff, giving it to the same people. You know what? We want to have more competition for this money, and we want people who are willing to innovate and maybe think outside the box a little bit. So I think that that's going to be really, really positive that she's done. We also, for K-12 funding, have a record $26.8 billion. So we had a record last year. This is a record. And our per pupil spending is more than has ever been done in Florida, and 405 more than last year, which was the record. And look, the amount of money you spend is not necessarily the same to outcomes, and we see that because, like Washington, D.C., I think they spend like $20,000, $25,000 a student, horrific results. And so it's not like it does, but at the same time, when you're talking about rewarding and retaining teachers and doing, it's good. So I think our performance in terms of the NAEP scores and where we rank now compared to the per pupil, we're getting great bang for the buck in Florida. Our performance is better than states that spend 2 or 3 times as much per student as we do. So we're proud that we were able, to increase funding for our school districts, but at the same time, we're even more proud that we're generating good results and better results than states that are putting even more money into it. Now, part of the reason that we're here is because we wanted to be in a nice, beautiful backdrop to highlight all that we did in this budget for Florida's natural resources, environmental stewardship, Everglades restoration, and the new program that we're going to do for the Indian River Lagoon. So we've done a lot in my tenure as governor. When I was, coming up, there's people said, oh, you can't get all this done, the sugar companies won't let you do it, all this other stuff, and we basically just plowed ahead and did it. And so we've So we were able to say we're going to be very ambitious with this. I think we said we were going to do my first 4 years, $2.5 billion for Everglades restoration and water resources protection. We ended up, and a lot of people said that was a pipe dream. Not only did we meet that, we exceeded it. We did $3.3 billion over those 4 years, and so that's more than double what the previous 4 years had done. Of course, we also did good policy. We had good personnel. One of the first things I did as governor, we replaced the whole South Florida Water Management District and changed direction there. You now have a lot more water flowing south to the Everglades and to Florida Bay than anyone thought we would ever have this soon. So we're proud of that. But what we also said is, okay, second term, we got to do even more. And so we did another executive order in January, and we called for $3.5 billion over the next 4 years for Everglades Restoration and Water Quality Initiative, and we also laid out additional policy. Well, the good news of this is I think this is probably the strongest environmental budget we've ever had in the history of Florida. This budget has a total of $7.3 billion between environment, agriculture, and natural resources, including $1.6 billion for Everglades and water quality projects. And so we set ambitious $3.5 billion over 4 years. We've already knocked out $1.6 billion of that just in this budget in year 1. So we're already way ahead of schedule, even of that big, ambitious goal, and we're really excited about that. Now, one of the things that's included in that is $100 million for the Indian River Lagoon Protection Program. So I issued an executive order calling for this to be established, and we wanted to make sure we have dedicated funding for water quality projects to benefit the Indian River Lagoon and to support their restoration efforts, and so we have that. So we have the first $100 million, and we'll continue to do it. We also have money for Florida Springs, alternative water supply projects, resiliency in the face of flooding and storm surge through our Resilient Florida program. At the end of the day, I think this is probably as strong as we've ever done in the state of Florida, and I think most people would say the last 4 years have been as strong as we've done. So we're upping the ante again, and I want to thank the legislature for being willing to do that. We also have $100 million for Florida Forever based on HB 1379 that we did, so we're proud of that. And then with education, one thing I didn't mention, for our universities, what we did do is we've said for tenured professors, you can't just sit there and not do anything. You have to go under review every 5 years as a tenured professor. And if you're unproductive, we're letting you go. And so that's really changed. You know, I think that's really changed positively these incentives. But what we did was say, you know, we're going to have more accountability over the faculty and demand more. But we're also going to be willing to pay more for performance if people are doing a good job. So we dedicated a lot of money for universities to recruit new faculty and to hire faculty. So you could be able to go to like MIT, offer someone like $50,000, $60,000 more to come to a university here in the state of Florida. And our new college in Sarasota, we did that. We did board members in January. I mean, no one knew what it was even doing. You know, and there was taking a lot of money, beautiful campus, but it was just mostly about political ideology. I mean, it was like left of the left on all this stuff. And I'm just like, is that really what the people of Florida want to be funding? You know, it's like, I don't think so. So we said, all right, so we're going to take it in a different direction. So we brought in reform-minded board members. They replaced the president with our former Commissioner of Education, Richard Corcoran. They eliminated DEI and CRT, and they said that this is going to be a classical liberal arts college like Hillsdale and some of these others. So you have a lot of momentum. This budget puts tens of millions of dollars just to new college. They've never had anything like that. So they're going to be able to recruit faculty. They're providing scholarships for students because the test scores have lagged there. And I think you're going to see parents from all over the country want to send their kids to new college very, very soon. It's a beautiful place to be. The college is right there. So this is how you take kind of a flailing institution, inject it with some sanity and common sense, get it on a foundation of good principle, and you know what? People respond to that. That's what we're doing. We also have $2.3 billion in the budget for mitigation, response, and recovery efforts through the Florida Division of Emergency Management. Some of this is Hurricane Ian. But we also, what we do is set aside about $500 million a year for our emergency preparedness and response fund. And part of the reason we're able to respond quickly is because we have this money that's there, and we're able to just go do things. So, you know, when these bridges went out, people were saying, like, okay, well, what are we going to do? We're not going to be able to do this for 6 months. And it wasn't state bridges, but they came to me and asked me to help. And I'm like, all right, yeah, we'll help. And so I said, let's just get it done. But we knew we'd be able to fund it regardless of what the feds reimbursed or any of that. So we just did it. You know what? It's like to get a bridge back in 3 days means the world to that island, and it's worth doing. So we're doing it. So there's a lot of successes here. I think that this and there's a few more. I've gone through probably in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, we've probably gone through over 100 bills. We've issued a couple vetoes. We got some more bills, but I think, and some of the bills are important, but I'd say this is kind of the capstone of the legislative session when we signed the budget today. I mean, we've done more in the last 6 to 8 months since the election than any, I think, state has done in our lifetime to move the ball forward and be bold and take on these issues. And that's one of the reasons why people, you know, are keep flooding down here. I'm not asking anybody to come. As much as I like a lot of the people I've met, you know, some states beg people to come because they need people and everything. And, you know, we've got a great state. We've got a lot of folks. So we're not out like, you know, running ads saying, please come. And even businesses now, you know, it used to be you have to recruit businesses. Now they're just like, how do I get to Florida? We want to come, and because it's such a good environment. And so, but that's just, look, at the end of the day, it's sad that it's the case, but there's a stark difference in how states have approached governing. So you have kind of a Chicago, Illinois, San Francisco, California model. And, those were, used to be very vibrant areas, and people are fleeing those areas. There's no public safety, leftist ideology, disrespect to taxpayers. I mean, there's a lot of the COVID lockdowns forever, mandates, all these crazy things. So people leave, and then Florida has really been the refuge of sanity for America over these last few years. And I think people have responded by voting with their feet. And at the end of the day, people can chirp, but how they behave is the best indicator of how they think. And I remember during COVID, some of our biggest critics publicly, politicians, lockdown politicians, media personalities who would say Florida is reckless because, we're open, they would end up coming down here. They would, and we would find them, and we'd expose, and it became a cottage industry. So when you see that, okay, that a lot of this stuff that's saying is just kind of fluff. So I'm excited to be able to sign the budget here in a second. I think this is a culmination of a lot of really good efforts and a lot of good work over these last many months. And the state's in great shape. The state's going in a great direction. You're not going to see us have the type of problems that these other states have with fiscal insolvency, driving people away. I mean, our tax base is expanding. The business investment's terrific. And, of course, this budget is in fantastic shape. I mean, this is, I think, the second biggest. Last year was the biggest surplus. I think this is the second biggest, but that's with us intentionally trying to do such big tax cuts and try to get the infrastructure money going, and we still have a really towering surplus. So I think that says a lot about how the state is managed. Okay, we're going to hear from a couple folks, then I'll sign the budget into law. So we'll start with Sean Hamilton from Department of Environmental Protection.
Thank you, Governor. It's an honor to be a part of an administration that's walking the walk, right? Not just talking the talk when it comes to our environment and our natural resources. And yes, I am here to make sure the governor has a great pen when he signs the environmental budget. The governor mentioned this, but I do want to go back and revisit it. This is the largest environmental budget in the history of our state. I mean, again, policy without funding we know what that is, but again, the fact that the funding's following the policy speaks to the governor's commitment to our environment. So again, I'm honored to be a part of this, and the governor set the stage, and he mentioned it in his first few days in office, signing a bold executive order, and I've admitted to him, I said, Governor, I may have been one of those going like, that's a lot of money, $2.5 billion in environment for somebody who's been in this business for 16 years. I'm there. I want to support you. I want to see it happen. And to blow it out of the water and follow it and challenge ourselves to achieve even more now for our environment, I think we all should be excited. We should all acknowledge the great momentum the governor's provided for our resources. So our environmental resources, as so many know, are key to our way of life. I mean, if you just look at this backdrop, it is a part of our DNA here in Florida. But more importantly, clean water is a part of the livelihood of so many of the folks who are here today and so many of the folks who call this marina home. And again, because of the governor's leadership, but also the leadership of our legislature, their support and their guidance, their willingness to go above and beyond also should be acknowledged. And think about the momentum that has been created over the last 4 years and the optimism you should have going into the next 4 years, especially, again, once the governor signs this historic budget. And so just to give a little context, the governor noted the Everglades, but let's talk about what that means functionally. Over the last 4 years, 55 projects have either broken ground, completed, or achieved major milestones in Everglades restoration. That is the definition of momentum. That is taking a resource, a project, an initiative, and moved it off of dead space and created the momentum necessary for us to start seeing the results the governor mentioned down in Florida Bay, to actually see what those investments are capable of. We also talked about record funding for water quality. This budget will secure $200 million for targeted water quality improvements throughout our state. This will allow our communities to do in-ground projects that will make a meaningful difference and improve and restore our waterways. $100 million for Indian River Lagoon. non-competitive $100 million for Indian River Lagoon, right? They're not competing with North Florida or any other parts of Florida. They're going to be focused on the projects here in the RL that will make the difference and restore this precious estuary that means so much to so many of us. And then, of course, I just want to, as a footnote, this $100 million builds on 340 that's already been invested in the RL. And so I think we all are excited about the day to see this resource recover, heal itself, and return to the days that so many talk about. We've provided unprecedented funding, and this budget will go a long way to help continue to protect our communities from flooding and all of the things that come with being a storm-prone state. You're going to see an investment in $356 million in the resilience of our communities with this budget. And again, that goes a long way, but then let's talk about what it means functionally. After conclusion of this cycle, all 67 counties in the state of Florida will have completed vulnerability assessments, a comprehensive plan to identify their assets and understand what's key, what infrastructure we need to prioritize and invest in going forward. Think about how far we've come in just a short life cycle of the program the governor championed and what it means to resilience in the future of our communities. And then again, to put the funding behind it with the support of the legislature is key. And then one of the things I'm excited about, and it's a line item in so many things, but the governor's starting a coral restoration initiative. That is amazing. Most folks, it's the unknown, it's the unseen. But when you think about resiliency and you think about the habitat associated with our coral resource, I think it's a great kept secret, but it's one we need to invest in the recovery in. And you'll see that in this budget. And then obviously something near and dear to my heart, over 175,000 acres has been conserved in land acquisitions under this administration. That's 97% in the Wildlife Corps. We understanding the importance, the synergy that's associated with that. But if you think about now, with the execution of this budget, having a dedicated $100 million for land acquisitions, not knowing year to year if you're going to get zero, if you're going to get $1 billion, knowing that you will have 100 will go a long way for us to plan and be able to communicate with stakeholders and give them reasonable expectations of what our conservation efforts would look like. And again, that's important, right? That land provides the aquifer recharge that we need. It provides the wildlife habitat. But more importantly to me, again, I'm an outdoors guy. It provides that recreational access that the governor noted so many great tax holidays are associated with that. And I do agree with the First Lady. We do need to find a way to retroactively do something with that diaper stuff, having 3 older kids. We've really got to figure that one out, Governor. All right. So again, I just in closing, this is an amazing budget, right? This continues the amazing momentum that you've seen over the last 4 years. This funding allows us to continue to provide the commitment to our communities to position Florida, again, as a leader in environmental protection. Governor has made it clear that this is a priority, but he's also made it equally clear it will continue to be a priority. And so thank you, Governor, for your leadership, and I look forward to continuing to work to protect Florida together.
Okay, Mike Holliday.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Holliday. I've been a fishing guide here on the Treasure Coast since 1986. Over that time, I've seen a total loss of our seagrass meadows. I've seen hundreds of billions of gallons of polluted water directed towards our coastal communities. And I've seen our beaches and waterways blanketed with toxic algae. There's a reason over 60% of the state's population lives along the coast and why tourists from around the world come to spend time here on our beaches and waterways. We have a water-based economy, and we live a water-oriented lifestyle. Quite simply, if you don't love the water and you live in Florida, you better play a lot of golf. And, you know, unlike many of the past governors who've kicked the can down the street when it comes to our environment, we've been fortunate to have Governor DeSantis, who over 2 terms has provided leadership for water resources protection by channeling historic funding towards Florida's environment. From the start, Governor DeSantis set the tone for long-term health of our coastal estuaries by restructuring the governing board of the South Florida Water Management District. He's committed hundreds of millions of dollars in state funding towards water quality projects that address nutrient pollution in the Indian River Lagoon. That lagoon right there behind me, that's my office. He's directed funding, historic funding, over $2.5 billion for Everglades restoration. And last year he vetoed Senate Bill 2508, which would have diverted essential funding away from Everglades restoration. Governor DeSantis is a champion of Florida's environment who understands the importance of healthy waterways for both our lifestyle and our economy. And he's not afraid to stand up for those and against those who would prioritize profit over common sense. I'm proud to stand here and support him. He listens to the people that live here. That's what our politicians are supposed to do. Listen to the people and vote the will of the people. And yet so few of them seem to remember that. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Governor DeSantis, for everything you do for Florida. I hope you have an amazing day. Thank you.
All right, Kyle.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Governor, for having me, and to the legislative delegation, you guys did an amazing job this session. Mr. Governor, under your leadership, these guys did phenomenal. And so, my name is Kyle Green. I own Kyle G's Restaurants here in the Treasure Coast. I was born and raised here. Thank you. I was born and raised here, and I've seen this area in Florida, but specifically this area, grow over the last, 10, 15 years, but specifically under the governor's leadership, it's been absolutely tremendous. I started washing dishes at 15 and worked my way up through the restaurant industry. I opened my first restaurant in 2007, and in 2009, in the aftermath of the recession, I had the unfortunate pleasure to close it down and understand what going through that was like. In 2017, I did have the chance to open my second restaurant, which is still there today. I did spend 2 years in the high tax area of California and came back immediately. So when we opened the restaurant, amongst other reasons, but when we opened the restaurant, we started off spectacular, and it's been going phenomenal since. And when COVID hit, excuse me, I had multiple reminiscence of closing my restaurant and having to look my team members in the face. So in this time, we had about 150 team members versus the 25 the first time around. So, we all know that Governor DeSantis gave us the opportunity to create our own destiny by just opening the state and saying, hey, make it happen, I'll deal with the rest of it. And then, excuse me, then bringing people or incentivizing people to come back to work versus, waiting on the government handout just to, sit at home and get paid for nothing, keeping people productive. And in the last couple of years, we've really seen a lot of what the delegate or what our representatives have done under governor's leadership in a lot of what you spoke to today, which you can do a lot more eloquently than I can. But, as far as the workforce and keeping people productive and investing in the education programs at the state level, at the school levels, keeping our schools focused on curriculums and not other things has been tremendous for us. And, Governor, I can tell you that since you gave us the opportunity, we went from 1 restaurant to 4 with 5 and 6 on the way. We're up to 357 employees. So we've doubled since COVID, and you've given us the opportunity, and we're on track to double again over the next 2 years. And that's how I think everything that you said in the hundreds of millions and trillions that a lot of people can lose sight on, I think and I'm not the only one, our team can, speak to that effect because it hits them on the personal level, helps them provide for their families, helps us provide meaningful jobs, and helps us just continue to grow, which helps us give back to our community. So we're the microscopic version of how all of your policies and what this budget does will impact all of us at the ground level. So thank you.
Where are the new ones going to be? All right, so we're going to so whoever wants to come up, we're going to make it official. Yeah, exactly. Appropriators in the front. Today is the 16th. You got room? Slide over. 15th. These are not